I've made millions of dollars as a professional speaker before the age of 33. I've had hundreds of college, university, and corporate clients, and I even had the privilege of sharing the stage with John Maxwell. And guess what? After that, he became a client too. Hello, my friends. My name is MJ Pittman, and the purpose of this channel is to teach emerging and executive leaders the science and strategies behind effective communication. You'll learn from me what to say and how to say it so that you become the leader people listen to. By the end of this video, I want you to know one thing. And that one thing is that clear communication is the art of making one complicated idea easy to understand. And the way you make one complicated idea easy to understand is by simplifying. I'm going to use my simplicity framework to simplify how I teach others to make things simple. So this will be broken up over multiple videos, so be sure to subscribe now so that you don't miss the next one. The best communicators make complicated ideas look obvious or even natural, the same way the best athletes make complicated moves look smooth. Simplicity is making a complicated idea easy to understand without changing what it means. In order to do this, it requires 5 things. The 5 components of simple communication are, number 1, one main takeaway. A simple idea has one main takeaway. Every example, every story, every detail that follows the one main takeaway should be points that make the one main takeaway, the one big idea, even more clear. Number 2 is that it is easy to follow. Simplicity allows the listener to see how each point of your idea connects to the next point and the overall main takeaway that we just mentioned. Number 3 is that every part earns its place. I call it the law of the cut. Each word, each example, and each of the details in your points should all make the main takeaway clear. If you can remove something and the main takeaway still works, then it is just decoration. And sometimes it's best to cut it out. Number 4 is that simplicity is listener dependent. Simplicity is measured by the number of steps between what the listener already knows and what you're teaching them that they don't know. The fewer the steps, the simpler it is. And then number 5, simplicity keeps the same meaning. Your simpler version should mean the same thing your original idea meant. If the meaning changes, then you've created a different idea altogether, not just a simpler one. So let's talk about the one takeaway idea in this video. Have you ever left a meeting, ended a call, or closed an email from your boss and realized that you couldn't name in one sentence what they were actually trying to tell you? Well, that means that the idea or the ideas that they were communicating weren't clear. And this is the most common failure in communication. George Bernard Shaw has a quote that says, "The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place." Law number 1 exists to prevent you from doing that as a leader. I call it the law of 1. When you try to send your listener off with 3 takeaways, then they go home with none. The brain can only hold one big idea, one main takeaway at a time. And so when you give them 3 things to remember, 5 things to remember, 7 things to remember, then it's going to be hard for that main takeaway to stick. Now, understand that a takeaway is not a point, okay? A takeaway is the thesis. It's the central idea you want your audience to remember, but your points are the supporting ideas that make the takeaway clear. So, for example, at the beginning of this video, I gave you the takeaway. I said, in my own words, by the end of this video, I want you to learn that clear communication is the art of making one complicated idea easy to understand. And the way you do that is through simplification or simplifying. But the 5 components of simplicity, the law of the path, the law of the one thing that we're talking about right now, the law of the listener, all of the laws are just points that support the main takeaway of making a big idea clear. So you can have multiple points that contribute to the big idea, but there only needs to be one big idea. You must understand this as a speaker because the listening attention span today is thinner now than it has ever been. Your listener is the same person who's drinking matcha lattes in the morning while they're texting their best friend, driving with their knees. They got 7 hours of screen time on social media, and they've been trained by algorithms to move on the moment something feels confusing, slow, or unclear. And so as a leader, your ideas are already fighting an uphill battle from the jump because people are distracted before you say a single word. So you get one shot to communicate one big idea. And if 3 takeaways are fighting for that one shot, they're all going to miss. The takeaway, defined, is the single sentence you want the listener to walk out with carrying in their head. They should be able to repeat it back to you a week later when you're walking down the hallway. Like, the one takeaway is the big idea. And most communicators resist this rule because they are afraid of leaving something important out. But the cost of leaving something out is small. But the cost of saying too much is that your audience remembers nothing. So whenever everything feels important, nothing stands out long enough to stick. The definition of a priority is that there must be an order of operations for what matters and what doesn't. And so what this looks like in practice is that when you outline a talk or a keynote or a meeting agenda or whatever, I want you to start off by writing one sentence at the top of your page that you want people to walk away with. And until you can name that one sentence, until you can put it out on paper and make it clear, then don't move on to building out your talk from there. The big idea for this video is that clear communication, as I said before, is the art of making one complicated idea easy to understand. So that was mine, but now you need to write yours. And so then from there, you add the supporting pieces, and for each piece, you ask yourself, how does this make my takeaway clear? Does it make my takeaway clear? If it does make the main point clearer, keep it. If it could get cut, get rid of it. And it is better to have good points for future takeaways that they're a better fit for than to try to squeeze it into a takeaway that you're working on right now. And then finally, a takeaway should pass a bumper sticker test. It should be less than 12 words. Like if you need annotations, a footnote, and 7 sources to explain your takeaway, then it is too much. Like have your takeaway one sentence, because if you want to be clear, it's best to be simple. Now, let me use a real-world example of what simplifying a complicated concept could look like. But before I do that, if you want more speaker tips that others don't teach, text SPEAK to 682-318-8801, and every week I'll send you an actionable tip or an encouraging message that you can implement immediately. Now, a real-world example of simplifying a complicated concept is in the financial space. Many of you know that I've done a lot of work in the financial literacy space. Let's talk about the topic of compound interest. Most people have heard of compound interest, but how would you explain compound interest in a way that's simple? Well, a standard definition for compound interest sounds like this. Compound interest is the interest you earn on both the original principal and the accumulated interest from previous periods, which causes your investment to grow exponentially over time. Now, technically, that's accurate, but it isn't very clear. Now, watch what happens when we simplify, when we have one clear takeaway that is easy to follow in one sentence long. Here it is. Compound interest is when your money makes money, and then that money makes money too. Ta-da! You see, the textbook version is true. The simple version, though, is useful. And while both are accurate, only one of them sticks. That is the difference law number 1 makes. If I were explaining to my kids, I'd be like, it's like your money having babies and then those babies having babies too. You know? So the big idea is this. Over this next week, I want you, before you have a meeting, a sales pitch, a speech, a talk, or whatever, I want you to write one sentence that you walk away with. I want you to write one sentence you want the listener to walk away with. Test every example, story, and detail against that one sentence. Trim that takeaway until it fits on the bumper sticker, and then you let it fly, okay? You'll find that whoever's on the receiving end of your communication will walk away knowing exactly what you said and what you meant, because you did the work to communicate in a clear and simple way. This, my friends, is how you become the leader people listen to. Because a leader that's easy to follow is a leader that's easy to follow. Speaking of, in the next video, we're going to go deeper on law number 2, easy to follow. Like this video and subscribe so that way you don't miss it. Thanks for hanging out with me on my very first video. I appreciate you guys. Have a great day.